Well, welcome to an exciting new update on Archmage Rises, and the most unique player-driven experience role-playing game ever made. What are you laughing at, Nick?
There seems to be a, I don't know what you'd call him, some crazy mage is taking over your controls there, Thomas.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I got it in the Humble Bundle for like $1. I thought this was better than my normal face, which most people have been complaining about in the forums. You know, I gotta say, it brings a tear to my eye when I read in the Steam forums, like, tell Thomas to take that mask off so he can see what it really looks like. It's not Halloween every week. And I'm like, this is what my mother gave me. Like, what am I supposed to do? So, I thought this would be an appropriate way to start today.
That's pretty hilarious.
Okay. So, on this exciting update, we are going to do a schedule update, talk about that. Then we're going to talk about this indie game called A Hero's Song, and why it failed and what that means to us in this project. And then we're going to talk about a brand new feature for the first time ever in a role-playing game. We call it the Character Timeline, which shows the life and timeline of a character. But before we get into that, I want to talk about last week's video update, where, okay, 2 weeks ago, we did, like, we pulled out all the stops. We did this, like, big update where we had a special guest, Ken Levine from Irrational Software. Okay, he comes and sort of by way of GDC, and we like splice him in and we talk about it. We talk about how we're doing incredible new things with like story narrative bricks and all that. Okay, so we get 14 votes for that. And then last week, I was sick, you were working on the bug, Roger's sick, we got nothing to say. I even said that in the description. I said, don't even waste your time watching this video. And that got 10 upvotes. Okay? I don't know why we're trying so hard, okay? So I just want to say that.
You need to take that off. I cannot take you seriously.
Okay. I figured it wouldn't last. Okay, I'm back with my regular mug right here. Okay, everybody's disappointed now, but at least, Nick, you're happier.
No, not really. I was writing the forums, I'll be honest.
That's right. Where are we at on the game, Nick?
Well, I am behind by a week or two. I don't know. I've been stuck in the timeline world for a while, which has been incredibly challenging and rewarding. So we're just finishing that up. That's where I am.
So yeah, 1 to 2 weeks behind for you. So we're working towards a completion date of January 24th of 2018, and I am at least 2 weeks behind on that as well. I have this past week been working on something that is not actually on the schedule. It actually comes much later on the schedule, but I kind of bumped it up to right now. So it's still about 2 weeks for me as well. So that's where we stand on the schedule. Sorry. And we're going to basically do what most companies do, which is just make a new schedule. There you go. Now we can be on time. No, I'm going to figure out a new schedule. I haven't had time yet to redo the schedule, but we'll figure it out how we can get back to being done on the 24th.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not news in the general sense of being news like it just happened. All this went down end of last year. But you just turned your webcam. I can't even see you.
Yeah, I went the wrong way.
Yeah, because it's reversed.
Yeah, that's weird.
So Hero Song is a game that we found out about probably just over a year ago. So it was in early access. And it had some similarities to Archmage Rises, and so that's when I started following it. And then I discovered, I don't know, I was going through my wish list or something like that. I was just looking through. I was like, oh yeah, Hero Song. I wonder what's going on with that. Is it still in early access? What's going on? And so I clicked on it, went in, and I saw that they basically canceled development, gave refunds to everybody that had ordered it. We have no way of knowing how many people that is. And the whole thing was done. It had a lot of similarities to Archmage Rises, and so that makes it a little bit scary. But then the second thing is who it was made by. So what's interesting about this particular game is who it's made by. So the fact that like a game that's on early access doesn't get finished, like gets canceled, okay, that's not really newsworthy. But I find this one in particularly special because it's created by John Smedley, or Smedley, I'm not sure how you say his name. And he was the former president of Sony Online Entertainment, the ones that he created the original company that created EverQuest. And so he comes from AAA and making big games, and then when he went off on his own and became an indie, he also tapped the shoulder of one of the guys that he worked with, one of the lead designers of EverQuest, and so the two of them started making this game called Hero Song. And I think that is really interesting that somebody with so much experience and pedigree and knowledge just didn't manage to make it.
Hero Song is an action RPG set in a fantasy world that you create. You can play the game in single player or make your server public, and up to 200 people can play with you in multiplayer. The game begins by you choosing the gods and goddesses that you want to bind to your new world. Each god has their own personality and things that they bring to the game, so by selecting different gods, you're going to change the world that you're creating in many different ways. The gods also bring with them the different races in the world of Hero Song. By choosing Saleya, you're also putting elves in the world. By choosing Krell, the god of the mountains, you'll be seeing dwarven civilizations in your world. By changing the different prominence levels of the gods that you've chosen, you'll heavily influence the world that you're creating in many unique ways. No two worlds are identical, and by selecting the different gods, you'll end up with your own, very unique world. Hero Song is a really unique game. If you die, you go to the underworld, and based on the god of the underworld that you've chosen, getting out of there will be a difficult task that's completely different based on the god that you've chosen. But if you die in the underworld, your character is dead. Hero Song is a hard game, and having your character permanently die is an integral part of Hero Song. After you create your world, we generate the history of that world, beginning with the gods. We have an incredibly detailed simulation of history that creates bloodlines for the different races, and we pass down different traits from generation to generation within those bloodlines, so that the entire population of the world is created. The races each get their own homes, cities and towns, and depending on how close they are to other civilizations in the world, we simulate wars and other world-changing events, including the creation of legendary magical items that are then placed throughout the world as a result of these events. Everything has a purpose. These items are placed there as a result of an actual event that happened in your world. The history of the world is chronicled in books that you can find throughout the world, and many of the NPCs actually know a lot about the history and will give you the clues of where to find the cool items that you want to go searching for. Now here's a look at some extended gameplay.
So you took a look at the game a bit, Nick, just like from trailers and whatever and stuff. And what did you think about Hero Song?
I thought a lot of the concept was really cool. You know, they do world building and history building when they generate the world and, hide items around. I was interested in playing it. There's not a lot of people trying to make, real living, breathing, simulated world. And so, I would like to see a lot of people try, and if they do something great, then it's something for people to that we can all learn from. So I thought it looked cool. I didn't really like the art style personally, but I thought a lot of their ideas were really interesting.
Yeah, so it was the world generation thing that really caught my attention, because I had spent almost 2 years working on world generation, and we're both inspired by the same source, Dwarf Fortress, which does a ton of world generation. And so they had like a cool kind of interface, which we're going to show our watchers right here. They have a cool interface where you can like slide the gods up and down and whatever, in order to generate your world. And then they go through and build out this history about who goes to war against whom, and some dude makes a cool artifact and then he dies, so it gets lost somewhere, and then you can discover it and find it. And a lot of those concepts are exactly what I built into Archmage Rises. People can't necessarily see the fruit of that labor yet, but it's in there. And I guess the thing that I really liked about it was they have this very, very basic screen where they kind of show the generating of the world, like the timeline and stuff. And I don't know, it kind of sells it for me. Like, I was like, oh wow, look, I can see what they're doing. I can see the simulator running or whatever. And I think that's somewhere where we've struggled.
Yeah, you mean like trying to... Yeah, one thing we keep running into is like we have all this data and things happening and simulating in the background. How do we show that to people, right? Because if they don't know it's there, it might take them a while to find it, or maybe they'll never know it's there. So I think it's important. It's one thing that we can do better is trying to bring some of that to the surface.
Yeah, I remember when the newest SimCity came out, the one without a number, because I don't know. So they decided to call it just SimCity, and they kept talking about I think they called it glass box. They were like, everything that's simulating you have to be able to see, right? So if there's like 100 cars, there should be 100 cars, and if there's like a blockage of poop in the sewer, you should see the blockage of poop in the sewer. And so as we've been building this game, it has become more and more evident to me how there's some balancing act there between what you simulate and what you show, and we have landed too far on the simulate and not show aspect of it. So that's something that I'm taking from them and going to do. So I don't know exactly how we change the screens yet, but it's just when I look at their world generation screen and our world generation screen, I feel like it's probably doing less than ours is, but it feels better. It just feels better for what it's doing. So we're going to take that to heart. Like another example in our game is we generate somewhere around 10,000 NPCs whenever we launch a game. The player has absolutely no indication that happened. There's 10,000 individual NPCs floating around doing things and stuff, right? So I think we should just have a screen and just fill it in with names. Just like boom, 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 fill it in with 10,000 names and say, okay, let's go.
Yeah, right.
So let's dig into why do you think that their game failed? And just to set that up, in the research that I did about the game, because I was really curious as a fan, like what happened to this game? What happened to these people? My understanding is they got $1 million of private equity invested into the game. I don't know whose $1 million that is, whether it's the people working on the game or outsiders. And then they went to Kickstarter in order to get another $800,000 in order to make or finish the game. That failed, and then they went to early access to try and get the to sell copies of the game in order to help fund development. And they also did an Indiegogo, and they didn't reach their target, which I think was 200,000 or so, but they did get 94,000, somewhere around there. And and so in Indiegogo, you get to keep all the money that you raise. You don't have to hit your target. So why do you think that the game failed?
I would have to be on the dev team to tell you for sure. I'm assuming that, to make a game with as much content as they are making, I'm guessing that they were, had a big staff to do it. That's probably expensive. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're outsiders, right? It's not like we called up one of the people on the dev team, but still, from the little bit of information that we've been able to gather, what are the lessons that you see coming out of Hero Song?
I don't really take any lessons from the fact that they didn't make it. I think I would say that some of the ideas they had are interesting, though they're pretty similar to Archmage. So I would say I don't know that I really learned any lessons. I was just I was rooting for them because I think people that are trying to push RPGs forward, I'm always on their side.
So you heard it here first. Nick doesn't learn anything, especially from others' failures. So you said you didn't like the art style of the game. That would be on the 2D action side of it?
Mainly it felt I don't know. It felt like kind of a kid's game, you know. And I don't mind like bubbly art, like Nintendo art, but it just felt, I don't know. It just felt kind of ugly and bubbly. And I think if you're gonna do bubbly, it needs to be cute and bubbly.
So you think there was a mix match between kind of what they were doing with, generating these cool RPG worlds and then showing like a Nintendo-esque type art style?
Yeah, I kind of feel if it was more like Diablo or something like that, I think it would probably have gotten more people excited about it.
Yeah, and it's an action RPG, and I think from what we see from Let's Plays that I watched, and also from the trailer, it plays a bit like a Diablo, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're walking around, you encounter monsters and shoot at them and stuff. A little bit like Nuclear Throne or something, but not that crazy, and no screen shake. That's probably why it failed, because they didn't they didn't put the juice in like screen shake. So the art style was probably one reason that they failed, right? They probably didn't capture as many people. So do you think our art style is right? Is good?
I think so. I mean,
before you speak, I'll let you know Roger watches these videos.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the look of it, and I think it captures the sort of D&D, like old style RPG players, stuff they're used to. So I think it works. And we're trying to give people as much choice as possible with less graphics, and to me that's the right way to go. But I think that all of the graphics we have look really good, and so I think it works.
I just want everyone to know that Nick is probably the nicest man on the face of the earth. So that would explain most of your answer. Yeah. I agree. I like the art style, not just for myself, but also for the role players that I know. I guess if people don't like the art style, now's the time to tell us.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, the next thing is they went into these different forms of raising money for the game, right? It almost seems to be like a list that every indie dev goes through. It's like, I'll try and get money privately, and in the business world we call that the 3 F's: friends, family, and fools. Those are the 3 F's that fund startups. And then after it's going for a while, then you get to the second stage where you might get venture capital or something like that. So I don't know exactly how much they got. I read $1 million, but who knows? And then they went to Kickstarter, and then they went to early access, and none of those things panned out for them, and so they just shuttered it. So I think it's pretty clear that they never nailed one of the most important things in indie game dev, which is, how am I going to afford to build it? Mm-hmm. So whatever your scale is for your game, and our game has a pretty big scale, except I scaled down the arts and graphics and animation side in order to make it affordable for me. You got to have an answer for who's going to pay for it. And if your answer is, people will just pay for it through Kickstarter or something like that, it's like you got a world of hurt ahead of you, because not very many people make enough money on Kickstarter to get their thing going. And if it's your first time out, it's really hard to estimate how much it's going to cost in order to do the thing. I've been estimating software projects for a better part of my life, and Archmage Rises has cost way more than my estimates, my early estimates.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's hard to estimate the 10th time, right?
Yeah.
When you're making a game, you're almost always making something nobody's made before, so it's inherently hard to estimate.
Well, I would argue that a lot of people don't make what hasn't been made before. In fact, they make what has been made before, because that's easier, and you know your costs and all that stuff. But anyways, the reason that I think Archmage will succeed is because I have our financing set. I am financing it right here. So makes it hard because sometimes I'm really, really, really short of cash. At my grocery store in the past 2 weeks, we had 2 compressors fail, and we had to call emergency refrigeration people to come out and fix them. Otherwise, I'd lose all my meat. And
Oh, wow.
It cost $2,000 to fix the first compressor and about $2,000 to fix the second compressor. So
Wow.
I got to come up with $4,000 in the next week in order to pay those emergency invoices. That's on top of all the expenses that come along with Archmage Rises and just living in my house, trying to pay the mortgage and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, more or less, my software company is footing the bill to make this game. So as long as the software company does well, then Archmage Rises will continue to be worked on. And if the software company goes down or something, then I don't know where I'm going to get my money from. I have some other means in which to keep it going. But I don't want to talk about those because they involve selling drugs illegally, and I wouldn't want people to know that I was doing that. But it's for a good cause, right?
Absolutely.
Buy some smack, get the game made. That's the new motto. And the third thing is they have been building their game from the ground up for multiplayer, and they were talking about building these worlds that would then be populated with up to 200 simultaneous players. I don't understand all the tech that goes into that, but what do you think of that?
It's very expensive because it's super time consuming. Even if you have a simple game, it's not getting it running that's the problem. It's getting it running well, right? Because all these little edge cases come in, and it's basically a giant integration problem, which is, integration problems always take 3 times longer than you think. So I know people that have tried and failed, and I know people that have tried and succeeded, but it's always super expensive. So I think if you were going to do a game like Archmage with multiplayer, you'd have to pare down the features really, really hard.
Wrong answer. You'd have to quadruple the budget. That's what you'd have to do.
Yeah, okay.
So they started out of the gate with multiplayer. So, I think there's a lesson there. Don't start out of the gate with multiplayer. I know that the predominant wisdom coming from Gamasutra, AAA, or whatever is know at the beginning whether it's going to be multiplayer or not. Don't tack on multiplayer on the end because it's like so hard in order to do. Well, these guys followed that very sage wisdom, which was start with multiplayer right away. Oh, darn, we ran out of money and the game got canceled. Right? So what was the point of starting with multiplayer right away? Like that didn't help them at all, right? So a wiser course is to make a really good single-player version and make multiplayer for the sequel. Or make multiplayer, I don't know, DLC or something like that. Just establish the player base first and then put in the multiplayer. Especially when it's something that is so hard and costly. And then I was just playing a multiplayer game on my new Oculus Rift with touch. I just got that set up. The family's away this weekend. Yay! So I finally had some time in order to set up the Oculus Rift, and it is amazing. And then I went to play some multiplayer game, and there's nobody online. I can't play with anybody, which is typically what you see with indie multiplayer games, right? And so if they had followed the path of single player now, and then make a sequel that had, or a DLC or something, or a free update or something that has the multiplayer, they would already have the established customer base, right? And it wouldn't be this big turnoff when you're like, hey, cool, multiplayer game, and then crickets, right? So then let's move on to talking about our game. Yay! Okay, so here we are in the latest version of Archmage Rises, and this is a pretty exciting feature that we call the timeline. So the passage of time in Archmage Rises is really important. It's probably the most important resource in the game. You only have so much time. Tracking the passage of time is pretty onerous on the player. So tracking like when something happened and knowing when something's going to happen in the future is very difficult. And we really want to show that this is your story in your world. These are the choices that you made along the way. These are the things that happened to you along the way. And so we came up with the idea of this timeline. And so why don't you explain what you put together here, Nick?
Sure. Yeah, the timeline is kind of like a calendar, but it's also kind of like a log. Basically, all the information you're going to want to know is going to be on here. This is the bigger version of it, but you're going to want to know, what seasons are coming up, because, your crops might fail or need to be harvested at a certain time. And so this will give you all that information. If you have to pay your bills, you'll see it on here. We want to have a smaller version too, because it's important to know if there's something coming up, like, you have to pay your bills, and if you don't, the noble is going to be upset with you. So it's very important to know what's coming up in the future as well as in the past, and the timeline will handle both of those things.
Yeah, so it's a time-based log of things that have happened to you, and also a calendar of events that are going to happen in the future. So just to explain some of the things that we see going on here, we have the season in the background showing you what the weather is going to be like. So I can scroll it, and just so everybody knows, this is a work in progress, so we have some graphical problems and such, but we thought it was good enough to show, but we're not quite done yet. But so here we could see the seasons, so we're going from spring into summer, and here we could see an example of, here's a holiday. Freedom Fete is a special festival that happens within the game world, and here I am zooming out, and so now we can see the seasons, and we can look forward into the future. And you can see here, last night happens on the last night of the year. There's a special celebration that happens there. And we can also see, for instance, when our birthday is. So we will turn 16 here at the end of August. And then here we can zoom in on things. And then we don't have it right now, but each one of these events is categorized. So there's like military, political, personal, calendar, economic, and local news. And so there's going to be ways to filter and like turn them on and off, so you can just see quest related things or just see economic things. But here we have a couple of events in here based on just some demo data that we put in. And so the idea here is you have a little peg telling you which day of the month it happened on. And then we alternate going up and down, and then we also dodge the thing, so you can still read it. And so the red outline means that it is a military or battle-related thing. And so here it's saying that we had a tough battle with 4 bandits. Over here we fought some wolves and we fought some goblins. And so that's a interesting way to see like your history. Now, where this becomes really interesting is if each town has its own timeline, and you can see who rose to power and why, when they went to war, maybe when peace was called and stuff. And then each person also has their own timeline, not just the player. So when you go up to someone and talk with them, if you get the relationship to a certain level, then you can ask them for their life story, and then you can go in and you can see when they were married and had their kids, when they changed jobs, or when some quest-related event happened to them. And that's a way of you doing kind of detective work and finding out things about people.
Yeah, and the little icon in the middle is showing the current time.
The current date, it's the first.
The current date. Yeah, so if you hit W, that's a special button. Basically, you'll see the time going a week forward. So you'll be able to center it, but because the game is so time-based and it's important, somebody might have a birthday coming up, and you also have to pay your bills on the same day or something. You might have to make some choices about what you're going to do, and going through logs is not very interesting. So we think this is a lot better way of sort of sorting out the information you need in the game without being too heavy-handed. And I think Roger did a great job with the art, and this fading stuff in the background took a lot of work. So we hope you like it.
The fading between the seasons, you mean?
Yeah.
Like summer and stuff. Well, I think that Nick did a good job on all the programming here, because it looks pretty much like the mock-up. That's what we like to see, Nick.
Yay!
Yay! So this is what we've been working on, and totally new, never seen it before in any other kind of game, but it makes a lot of sense for Archmage Rises, and I don't really have anything else to say. We're going to keep working on it, perfecting this, and that's about it.
Oh, thank you.